does anyone feel that I feel like I've been getting, I don't say bombarded, but a lot of inquiries and residents expressing concerns over, and I think there was a big thing on next door, and so that definitely raises the occasion, but raises the profile, but on the use of herbicides and our policies around that. Do we feel like we need to maybe discuss that again in a public meeting so we can kind of say what, and I'm not sure we ever really, I don't know. Are we happy with our policy?
Well, I think there's a difference between policy and actual implementation or practice that follows the policy, because that's not what was happening. And I think that's what part of the problem was. And
so I think maybe there's enough noise in the community. Perhaps we might want to have a short agenda item so that in a public setting we can kind of talk about what our intent is.
Let me suggest this, rather than schedule an agenda item, that we ask the staff to provide us with a response from the vendor about how they are currently using it. We can review that, and then we can decide based on that whether or not an agenda item is appropriate.
Well, how would they communicate that to us?
And just email it to us.
Just to us and not in a public?
I think they can post it on the website if people are interested in it. It'd be a public record anyway.
Okay.
Again, it becomes a budget issue. There are going to be those in the community that want absolutely no herbicides of any kind. That I would love to have that happen, but there's a budget impact to that. It's a budget question. And we haven't been able to adequately maintain our landscaping, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. New vendor arrives, uses some herbicides. Some people don't like that. They get upset, specifically on one product. I completely understand. The question is there a way, I mean, I hate to make the comparison. This is all towards creating the agenda item. We're not setting policies here. This is like getting excited about banning leaf blowers and then not doing it. I mean, we might as well just remove the ban on leaf blowers because we don't enforce it. You know, the flips, that wasn't a policy decision. I'm happy to have an agenda item, but we need to have the understanding from a budgetary perspective around what those decisions mean. Because when we just show up and say, I don't want Roundup in my city, great, me either. Or anything else, right? So
I think the agenda item, actually you hit it. I think the agenda item is a discussion about those trade-offs.
Okay.
So people who say, hey, I don't want one weed in this town, and then you say, okay, the way to accomplish that is with pesticides, and then they say, oh wait, I don't want pesticides. Well, okay. So
I think all I'm saying is I think if we're going to discuss it, we need to understand the budgetary impacts associated with the choices.
Yeah, I would say all of that, but I don't know if there's a consensus to talk about that. I'm not sure. When I think back to when we changed our policy from no herbicide, you know, it was organics, and it's like, no, the organics don't, you know, when I think about when we kind of said, you know, probably a year ago and said, okay, fine, use whatever to get rid of these weeds, like, I'm not entirely sure I'm comfortable with our thought process. It was a little more knee-jerk.
Well, I don't believe that's what we put in the contract. At least that wasn't the intent. So that's why I would like to understand what is the practice, and is that in compliance with what we expected and have directed. And so is the problem the contract, or is the problem the practice?
Right. Well, anyway, that's where I was coming from on that.
Can go back to my suggestion that we ask the vendor to tell us
that was my point. Get us a report that tells us that, and then we can decide, do we need to.
Okay.
Let me just quickly address that. If the full council doesn't know, that we put a stop to the vendor using any herbicides because they weren't doing them correctly. I think it was in one of my Friday emails that I sent out. We required him to follow this. It was the practice. It wasn't about using herbicides. It was the way they were doing it, and we had sat with him and said, you need to follow this procedure, and there's certain signage that needs to go up and some other things. I said, in fact, take a picture and timestamp it and send it to me, because other people are taking a picture of you. And it wasn't, yes, we'll do that. And then it wasn't a few days later that happened. And so we have been you heard him say today, he hasn't done it in a month. He said that in his public comment, because it's taken him a month to give us his plan. In fact, when I talked to him 2 weeks ago on the phone, I said, or last week on the phone that I referenced in my comment back to him, I said, once again, take a picture so we can defend your use of the herbicides. We can't defend it unless you prove it. So to your point, Councilmember Ruse, yes, we will happily do that. We're waiting for the vendor to give us his plan.
So it sounds